To me, men have to get involved in the protection of women on a sexual basis first before I even want to talk to you about my job.
Oh, isn't that
like, to me, if you can't defend women physically, emotionally, psychologically from abusers and attackers, you are not an ally.
You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This week, I got to speak with Andrea Ciannavei. She's a television writer and an activist. Now, I should tell you, if you're sensitive to coarse language and F-bombs, this is not the episode for you. She went there, and I went right there with her. But if you want an extremely raw, real, and honest conversation, you're not going to be able to get enough of her. Now, I should also say the views expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views of your host, although many of them certainly are. I'll let you guess which is which. Anyway, buckle in. Have a listen. What do you do?
I am a TV writer.
A TV writer?
Yeah.
Okay, how'd you get that job? Tell me the whole story.
Sure. It's sort of circuitous. So I...
That's a word a writer would use.
Yes, it is. Yeah. My college education at work. So I went to school for dramatic writing at NYU. And then I sort of... I had a 3 years writer's block, but I also was an actor, so I wanted to do that. So I was auditioning, and I got some TV roles. It was pretty cool, and then I hooked up with Labyrinth Theater Company in 2000. And
in New York.
In New York, and I was working in their production office, and also had aspirations to act with them and that kind of stuff, and that eventually happened. But so I was doing that from like 2000 until 2012. Within that, I started writing again in 2002, and eventually Labyrinth did a development production of my play called Pretty Chin Up at the Public, and that play got me into Juilliard in 2008 to the playwriting program.
What?
Yeah, there's a 2-year playwriting program there, so I did that.
Okay, back up.
Yeah.
Your first play got put on at the Public?
My second play got developed. They had a development production at the Public through Labyrinth.
Okay, that's pretty great.
Yeah, it was very...
That's pretty exciting.
It was pretty exciting.
Okay, so then you went to Juilliard.
So then I went to Juilliard in 2008. At the same time, because I was working at Labyrinth all that time, there was a woman on the board there named Luli Haddad, and we're great friends. And she got on the board of the Writers Guild Initiative, which is a development, like a foundation sort of wing of the Writers Guild America East, a union for writers there. So she was on that board, then she was on the board of the Writers Guild Initiative, and with Tom Fontana. He created Oz. He's like a TV guy.
Oh, that Tom Fontana.
Yeah, that guy. He wrote on St. Elsewhere for like a million years. Like, he's like a titan, like old TV titan. Let's call him old. But,
meaning a legend.
He's like, yes.
That's what you meant.
Yeah. Staying power. There you go.
That's right.
They hired me to to coordinate these writing workshops that I mentioned earlier about creating these free writing workshops for wounded veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. That also started in 2008.
Okay, what does that look like? What is that writing workshop?
So basically that's like, we take 40 either wounded veterans that have injuries from anything from like PTSD to traumatic brain injury to obviously amputations, burns, that kind of stuff. And they come to wherever we're going to be. We've done them in New York, Columbus, San Antonio. We've done them in Denver. We've done them in Landstuhl, Germany. We've done it in Seattle. I'm probably leaving some other ones out. But anyway, they come there. I get like 14 writers from all different mediums. So like novel writers, memoirists, TV writers, screenwriters, playwrights, poets, the whole thing. And I pair those guys up, and they're in like various levels of fame and notoriety, or not, right? And so I pair them up, and then I give them like 5 to 6 veterans a piece. So even though we have 40 people at the workshop, we're not teaching 40 people at the same time or whatever. And there's a very low barrier to entry. They don't have to have any experience really. They just have to have a desire to tell a story, and it can be any story. It doesn't have to be war related. It doesn't have to be there's no parameters in terms of like content. So it's a weekend, and usually the mentors will take them through the basics of storytelling. They have to get a feel for the room and see like what kind of experience the group has to get accumulatively. And they get put up. They don't have to pay for any food. They don't have to pay for any travel. Like, everyone's taken care of very well. And then we come back 6 months later to see how far they've come with whatever project they have. So, and then after that, they keep in touch with each other to some extent. My job basically is to make all of that happen. And so I was doing that and going to Juilliard at the same time. And Tom, 2 years in, we were in Texas doing another workshop, and I remember I was eating a chicken wrap sandwich. I'll never forget it. It was like chicken wrap sandwich with like sun-dried tomato and some shit in it. And he literally, I was like mid-bite, and he was like, hey, I'm doing this show about Pope Alexander VI, set in like 1492 in Italy, and I really like your flavor, and I was just wondering if would you consider writing an episode for me? And I was like, would I consider writing an episode? You're so fucking polite, like unbelievable. I was like, yeah, dude, yes. So
yes, please.
Yes, I will take that money and that experience to work with you. So that's how I got into TV. It really was. I couldn't possibly predict how that was gonna work. Because, like, when I was at Juilliard, like, I couldn't get arrested by a theater agent. And we can talk more about that, I'm sure. But, like, I was really feeling like I'm a piece of shit. I'm completely fraudulent. I was like, Juilliard made a mistake. I don't belong here.
You're an imposter.
A total imposter. And
Stop being such a girl.
I know. I've had that problem my entire life. But it was really, like, and because it just was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a playwright. I just don't know what to do. I felt like lost. And yeah.
Let's unpack that for a minute. Do you not know how to get a job in the business, or you felt like you didn't know how to
I don't know how to connect with theaters, like with what they're looking for in terms of work.
But you know how to write.
I know how to write, yeah.
But it's getting it made or getting the job.
Yeah, or like writing things that people want to support in that way. Like,
yeah.
I was writing personal plays for a while that I felt had resonance on a more universal scale. I've been told that by other people, but there's like some kind of, like, I know my plays connect with audience members because I've done them, and like Juilliard did a workshop production of a play of mine a couple of years ago that people were like raving about, but theaters, somehow there's like a disconnect, and I don't know what it is. And then and with agents, theater agents, I find them to be completely ambiguous about every fucking thing, and it's literally like, can you just give me a straight answer about something, anything, like just literally A to B, what the fuck, like, and I just couldn't get it, like there were no notes, there was no I don't even know what the word is. There was just nothing to hold on to. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, when I give my pilots, for example, to my agents and my manager, and they're really smart guys. I love them. They're like really cool people. When I give them my script, they read it and they come back with notes. Some of the notes might be tiny little like things. Some of them might be sort of structural, whatever, but they're clear. Yeah. And it's their opinion, and I know how to sift through them and say, yeah, that's useful. No, that's not, whatever. But with theater agents, that sort of care and like attention to detail and sort of like giving me their personal feedback was not like, it just wasn't there.
Do you think they just don't know?
They may not know, or there might be I think there's this reticence to tell playwrights things.
Oh, because you're the artist, so we can't touch.
So we'll say something in sort of like smoke signals and like hieroglyphics, but we're not gonna, because we don't want to offend you. But it's literally like, it's just such bullshit. You know what I mean? And
you're like, I'm an Italian New Yorker.
You need to tell me what the fuck it is. Like, I need the guidepost, and I can disagree with you. Like, I know I have enough agency to disagree with a note, but give me the fucking note. Anyway, I have resentment. So So that was like my entree to TV writing, and it kind of snowballed from there. He kept hiring me to write on Borgia. Then he put me on Copper, which was kind of a miscast because Copper's about fucking Irish people in the middle of New York at the turn of the century, and
which is what's so different from the Italians in New York.
Well, but cops, and I'm not Irish, and I just felt like I didn't do as good of a job as I should have, and whatever. I just was like, and it was like literally like turn a script around in 3 weeks and whatever. But they were happy with it, but I for myself was like, eh. And then from there, I was procrastinating on writing about. My agents are with UTA, and they were like, "Yo, we need an original pilot. You have to write something." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to write anything about being overweight. Like, I was like, what do I write about that I give a shit about that isn't like stupid and been done 100 times? I just don't want to do it." So but underneath that, it was like, I'm not smart enough. I can't do it. I have nothing to like. I was just doing this whole like story. No, it's stupid. So then
it's okay. May I just interrupt
please,
for a moment?
Yeah, this is a long story. I'm sorry.
What is getting me, and what I know like listeners will connect with, is was this a master's program at Juilliard?
Oh yeah, they only accept 4 students a year.
Okay,
and it's free.
So wait a minute. So you can be one of 4 people in the Juilliard master's writing program,
yeah.
And still think you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, okay, so everyone else who doesn't feel like they know what they're doing,
yeah, you're not alone.
You're fine.
Yeah, you're actually right on track. and so yeah, like. So that was happening in 2010, and then my teacher from Juilliard, Marcia Norman, hired me to go on this trip to like 10 countries in Africa, Asia, and South America to research women's empowerment issues, which is a very sort of academic way of saying like sex slavery, gender violence, drugs, like the whole thing. Yeah, it was really uplifting. And I went to 10 countries to interview NGOs at various levels, and the UN, which was a complete shit show, and then the community that these people are trying to serve in some way. And it was a huge trip, and it was very traumatic in many ways. I was like constantly like in PTSD mode. I didn't know it. I gained like 40 pounds in Africa. Like I literally was out of my mind. And but it was really it was huge, and it was transformative and painful in the way that those things always
changes
are.
Your life.
Yeah. And then on top of it, I was traveling with 3 women who like all hated each other, and we're all like white women, and we're just traveling through, it's like the poverty porn tour. It's very colonial in some way, and I don't mean to sound like an ingrate, because I'm so grateful for it, and I love Marcia, and it was like, it literally changed my life, but it just brought up all of these like race issues and class issues and what is helping and what is service, and
like we're bitching that we can't be executive vice presidents,
or whatever, bitching about whatever. It just like it just put. I had always, I don't come from money at all. Like my dad never went to the 6th grade. He was a poor Italian farmer. His family historically were like tenant farmers.
Are you first generation?
Yeah, on his side, and my mother is second generation Italian. And my mother did like 2 years in college, so we weren't like on welfare or anything. Nothing's wrong with that. Like, but just to give like we didn't have money for travel.
So you're really like, what the fuck am I doing at Juilliard?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
How'd they let me in?
How did that happen? Right. It's like, and so, I had always wanted to go to countries that don't have all of the comforts and the infrastructure and the sort of like conspiracy of denial that you have in the States. And literally the prayer was, I literally in my head was like, please God, please send me out into the world so I can get my ass handed to me. And I literally got that prayer answered like in this trip. Like this was the trip, and
the conspiracy of denial.
Yeah. Whew. So I went to these places, I got my ass handed to me, and then I came back, right when Occupy Wall Street started in New York, and I had been praying for something like that to happen forever.
So you're carrying the sign.
Yeah, because I was like infuriated, and I've always had like a political sense about me, and like political rage, and like really hating the way that we sort of operate as a matter of course, but there was never a clear way to plug into anything that would like that would give that a place to express itself in a constructive way. But then Occupy started, and I was like, oh, this is something that I've not seen before. So I got really involved with that, and was like involved with basically trying to build networks of communication between all the different camps that were happening in the States, and like network building, movement building type stuff. And so I did that pretty much like full time, plus doing freelance jobs in New York. And what all of that did finally, because now it was like a year and a half later, 2 years later, my agents were still asking me for a pilot. And I was like, I really, I'm doing all this stuff, and I have nothing to write about. And my friend Liz Tuccillo, who wrote for Sex and the City, and she also co-wrote He's Just Not That Into You, the book, and another one about being single. I can't remember the title, but she's a dear friend of mine. I've known her for many years. And she took me out for lunch, and she's like, you are full of shit. Like, you are on Facebook yelling about 15 different things in a, like, well-educated way all the time. Like, you have tons of stuff to write about. So what is it? Like, and so I kind of, like, zoomed out for a minute and looked at my life, and I'm like, okay, I work with military. I do Occupy Wall Street stuff, like activism. And
you did the woman's tour,
and then the tour, like all this travel. So then from there, a story came out, and then I wrote a pilot, and it's called Bowling Green, and that pilot, I wrote it in my friend Francine Volpe, who's a playwright and also a teacher, TV writer. She's brilliant. I took her class. I needed what I realized, like, I need a thing where I show up every week with pages. Like, I just need that
structure.
Yeah, I got to pay money for it. I got to do it. It's like, it's an investment in myself. And trust me, like, I was broke. I mean, like, back.
Well, Occupy Wall Street doesn't pay very well. I've
yeah,
heard.
Nothing at all, really. And, but in like living in New York and the whole thing, everybody knows that story. So I wrote the pilot, and then I gave it to my agents. They were happy. They gave me notes. I turned it around. I gave it back to them. And I think basically like 6 months later, Peter Horton, Adam Armis, and Kay Foster were doing a show called Odyssey for NBC. They read my pilot. It was very much in line with how they were writing that story. And I met them on Skype for a job interview. And they hired me on the spot, and I had 5 days to move to LA to be a staff writer for the first time. Because Tom doesn't do staff writing. He just gives you an outline and says, I'll see you in 4 weeks. So this was like my first staff, like, writer's room thing. Yeah. So that was 2014.
Okay, so what was that like, your first time in the writer's room?
it was, I should probably just start by saying, like, the end of 2013 to June of 2014 was a unmitigated shit show. Like, I broke up with my boyfriend after 5 years. He moved out. I went to teach in Utah in this little dot of a town called Ephraim, and at Snow College. I was a dramatic writing teacher there for like 3 months. I was a guest teacher. And literally, like, the town was like, I think maybe 3 to 4 miles wide, like, and like 5,000 people. Like, there was nothing there. It was great for me to be out of the city. But while I was there, Phil Hoffman passed away, and then another lab member, Ed Vassallo, passed away, and then 2 other friends passed away, all within like 2 months. And at the same time, I was like having like relationship issues with my ex. Like, I found out that he was like, he got right into a relationship right away after me. It was it was crazy. So I was out of my mind. And then I like returned to New York.
Wait, was this before the writing room or after the writing room?
Right before it.
Okay.
Yeah, leading up to it. So then I get to New York, and there were these 2 women that were in my apartment who basically trashed the shit out of it. Like, trashed the apartment, and it was madness. Anyway, I was saying to my friend, I was like, I just need to be medevaced out of my life because I just can't take any more. And then I got this job. So I came to LA with all of this madness in the background. And I was and I didn't know that being in a room with other writers trying to break a story is really more like improv than it is sitting in front of your
writing.
Right, yeah. So I didn't know that. That's not something that was ever taught, because when we were going to college in the 90s, TV was a whole other fucking thing. And there were only like 3 shows that were kind of good,
So I'm dying to know, Were you quiet in the room or were you lippy?
I was quiet in the room most of the time, the first time. And they expected that because, everybody...
The new guy has to be quiet.
The new guy has to be quiet, and everybody sort of empathizes with the position that you're in. So, it's not like I'm going into it... Like, Adam and Kay and Peter, certainly Adam and Kay, Peter's more of a director, but, they all know, what it is to be a staff writer in a room for a first time. And they hired me for my experience with travel and military and all of this other stuff. But the responsibility of breaking story and coming up with pitches wasn't on me. It was on the co-EP. It was on the supervising producer. And I followed their lead. And if there were certain things that I could pitch confidently, I did. And at first they were they weren't sure about me because I was quiet in the room. But they were also sympathetic. But then when I wrote my outline, that's when they were oh, you can write. And I was yeah, I can fucking write. You know what I mean? I know that I can write, but it's all of the interpersonal sort of politics thing. That's when I'm oh, maybe I suck. But anyway, so once I did that, then things were they understood where I was coming from, And then I wrote my script, and the script was a tough situation because the story wasn't broken properly, so we had to go back and re-break it. And so,
what does that mean to break a story?
It means you're in thinking about your characters and where you want them to end up. You have to start thinking about what are the plot points, what are the decisions that they make to get to that place, and what is their emotional response to something, and so it can be one of those situations where for me, because I was new, because it was my first time, and I wrote the outline for my episode, I just followed the directions because I wasn't sure how much liberty I could take outside of the outline, and that really depends on your boss. Some people are do not stray from what is written. Other people are if it doesn't work, fix it. And then it really depends, and I didn't know. I just kind of, and I asked, so it was kind of I just, in order for me to get through it, because I was so afraid, I just was I'm going to write exactly what they gave me. This is the outline. They approved it. The studio approved it. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And the first draft of the script, there were certain things that didn't work that, that they weren't psyched about, but then they gave me notes, and it ended up being fine, But then, so that ended, and then
Did you do a whole season?
They hired us for the last half of the season. The way that the show was developed was weird. They got money to break the first 6 episodes with a whole other team. And then when they got the money to do the last half,
and then they got to pick up.
They got to pick up. Then they hired me and 2 other people. Okay. And so we came in and broke the rest of the season. So part of it was catching up to what came before, and then trying to move forward. So for me, the learning curve was enormous. Mm-hmm. And mentally and emotionally, I was just a wasteland given from what I had just come from. Yeah. So I really, I'm now I'm afraid people are thinking I'm sugarcoating. It was actually a really good experience, and I learned a lot. But it was a Tough Mudder course. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Trial by fire.
Yeah, totally. And so then after that, one of the things that's so insane, it's the money side of this stuff is crazy because, I was a broke playwright for 20 years, and then all of a sudden you're making $4,100 a week, and you're OMG, I'm fucking balling, you know what I mean? And you start and I didn't it's not I went out and a Givenchy fucking binge or whatever at all. I literally was let me pay back everybody I've ever borrowed money from. I had people had helped. When I got this job that brought me here, I had $150 to my name.
Oh my God.
Period. And my friend Liz and all these other people were how can I help you? They gave me thousands of dollars to get me to LA, to get me a car, to pay for my, I had no money. And I was as soon as I get paid, I'm paying you back. And it took a minute for the studio to get their shit together, but eventually I did. I started paying everybody back. And I bring all this up because by the time the show was over, I had nothing to show for it.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I moved. I had essentially moved to LA with no money.
Yeah.
And so I paid all these people back. I've paid these bills, but then I was at the end of the show, I was at zero and I needed to make money. So I started teaching. And I taught at Chapman University, and then I taught privately too. And that actually really helped me because I started running the classes like a writer's room. So it was practice for me, it was practice for them, and it was
great.
Yeah, it was really cool that way. So then, for a year and a half, I went on meeting after meeting after meeting. I'm a fucking great interviewer.
I'll say.
I read my shit. I read the stuff. I come in with like good ideas. I can talk to them.
You're prepared.
Yeah, I can talk about any subject that they want. Like I don't think I'm a horrible person to talk to or whatever. I can say that. So it would literally come down to like me and another person, and then the job would go to the other person for something that. And at first I was like, I must be doing something wrong because I'm not getting hired. And
what was the demographic of the other person?
I don't know. Sometimes it was like, oh, that person's from the South, or oh, that person is of, of color or whatever. And my opinion about that is like, the rooms should always be diverse. Mm-hmm. That has to happen. So I'm willing to like pay the price for that. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm okay.
Well, was the other guy always a white guy, or was it some
No,
other
it wasn't.
diversity?
It was a diversity thing, which is as it should be.
Yeah.
But it was painful at the time.
But that includes women. Hello.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah, I know. But it's still, but there's I met Ava DuVernay's showrunner for Queen Sugar. There was no logical reason for me to be on that show. I'm neither black nor from the South. Like that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They, the showrunner didn't realize that I was white when she read my script. She was like, "You write people of color really well." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I do." But it was
disqualified.
But I was like, no, that room should be as black as you can possibly make it. Yeah. Like, it needs to be that. Because nobody would blink an eye at an all-white male room. Nobody would ever question that. Right. I mean, certain people would, but most people wouldn't. So I think, like, the effort to make those rooms more diverse is the right way to go. Anyway, but yeah, it was like 8 job interviews, like 8 projects that I was like, close to getting and not getting. One of them was a it was a military show written by the brothers who did like Jarhead or whatever, and and they read my script, which was like really left, and they're not, like, they're really not. And so I think the delicate way that they said it to my manager was something along the lines of like, I wouldn't be a good fit in the room.
You're a little too liberal?
A little too liberal. But they had never even met me, so there was no way for them to actually know that, other than, like, they read my script and, like, this bitch is going to drive us crazy. So I was like, all right. And I was like, yeah, and I don't want to be on that show either.
And that's fair.
Yeah, it's totally fair. Like, I have zero tolerance for conservative thought. Like, zero call me an asshole if you want to. I've gotten more and more rigid in my view of that. As during this election year, I've become more like staunchly anti-Republican. Like, if you are a Republican, you are a Nazi, and I have nothing to say to you. Like, you're off.
So they were right. You would not have been a good fit.
Yeah, totally would have been totally bad fit. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So then finally, and I actually, one of the jobs I was seen for or read for was The Path. Jessica Goldberg is a friend. Like, we met 2 years ago, and she asked me for my script, and I gave it to her, and she loved it, and she wanted to hire me, but they needed to like cast the room in a certain way, so they didn't hire me for the first season. And then a spot opened up in the middle of season 2 this year, and she hired me mid-May. So I've been working on The Path since mid-May, and I noticed, like, this time in the room, I had a lot more confidence. I was able to pitch more, and not in a way that was like I had confidence, but I wasn't like arrogant about shit. Do you know what I mean?
What does it mean that you're pitching? Are you like, well, what if they did blah 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 blah?
Yeah, like what if they said this, or what if they did this, or what if their response is like in this vein, you know, or what if it's set here and blah blah blah, you know, that kind of thing. Like yesterday, she was like, hey, you know, what are some pitches for like this particular character? Where can they be? And so I came up with like 5 things. Like maybe she's at an SRO. Maybe she works at a halfway house. Maybe she like is telemarketing.
Laundromat. Starbucks.
Yeah, it's like, just like throwing things out there and not worrying about like, oh, if I say the wrong thing, then all of a sudden they're going to think that I blow. You know what I mean? And like, and so, and one of the things that ended up happening in the room was like, again, I get into this thing of like, she hates me. I'm gonna get fired. They think I'm stupid. Like my brain just
the self-talk.
It's
so
amazing. It was so bad, and it's painful because it's literally like I don't want to be spending my time hating myself. I mean, this is like an ongoing theme in my life anyway. But like,
what a bunch of noise that just gets in the way.
It's completely
and
bad.
It's all made up.
It's all made up, but like. It's kind of like when someone's like hysterical, you have to like repeatedly say what reality is before they start to see it. So I was telling a friend of mine, like I'm starting to go into the room feeling like I'm like I suck and like something's wrong. And she was like, how about if whenever you feel that way, you just send me an email. I won't always be able to respond, but just say it out loud.
Get it out.
Just get it out and send it to me and like that. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then the next day, like she said that to me over drinks one night. The next day I went into work and Jessica was talking about how she got a phone call from Aaron Paul saying how much he like loved the episode that he just read. Not giving her any notes, not saying a single thing other than thank you, this was great. And so the conversation was about how...
And she wrote it?
Somebody, I don't think so. No, somebody wrote it. But she, like showrunners, like you have your staff, they write a script and then you do a pass on it and you send it off. And that's generally how it goes. But to even like to just say like thank you, this was great, and leave it at that, like that's a rare thing. And she was just talking about how people in general, like the conversation became general about like how people don't pay each other compliments. Like when things are wrong, you hear about it immediately, but you don't necessarily hear when things are right.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me, I'm like, that's the solution to my self-centered fucking fear and craziness, is to be like complimentary towards other people, not in a bullshit way, like be genuine with other people, but to be generous in that way. And so I started practicing that. Like, one of the writers like wrote an episode, and I was like, I sent him an email. I was like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I love this about the episode, blah blah blah. And it was all true. It's not like there's no kiss assy like, oh, like what can I get out of this good behavior in quotes, just like doing it. And the fucking issue like eventually faded out, and I was like fine again.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's cool. Like, but I think that sort of thing apply. What's crazy is that like, I go to 12-step programs like a lot, and
all
so
of them?
yeah, there's like 4. I've got like a cornucopia of bullshit to deal with, and like, and one of the tenets is service. Like the way to get out of your self-loathing and your pain and whatever is to be of service to others. Now that can be a really dangerous thing if you're like a codependent, caretaking fixer like me. Yeah, like I can then like, do that to the point of like avoiding my life. So there is a balance to be had, but it's still true that when you are of service in a sane and happy way to other people, you forget your own like mishigas, but somehow I needed to hear that again in a different way to apply it to a writer's
context.
Yeah.
What I found interviewing women for this podcast and women at your level and doing this is it more often than not is when they're so generous, so complimentary, so generous, and I think that just breeds more success.
I agree, and I have to tell you, like, I've not had, you hear those like titillating, horrendous stories of people in writers' rooms or whatever, like, I don't know if you've heard those stories, but
like what?
Well, I don't know, like I don't want to like out anybody, but like, I hear those stories about showrunners who are disasters and make you stay till 2 a.m. and they're fucking dicks, and like you hear those stories. I have not had a single experience. I've been, knock on wood, I am so lucky. Like, Tom Fontana is a mensch. The man is so generous. He's built his entire business on bringing people up through the ranks and teaching them how to write and how to be in TV.
That just makes you better.
Yeah, and he's been a real example for me to watch, like how he conducts himself with people, because he's an extremely powerful person, and people, like, I'm always interested in how I respond to power and how people respond to power, because I think it's a real sort of like social problem that we all have, that's like affecting in every single like area. So he's this guy that wields enormous power, financial power, artistic power, personal power, all of these things, and he doesn't abuse it. That I've seen, like, he does not abuse his power with people. He treats people with respect. He's a human being like anybody, and I'm sure he loses his temper like everybody else, but he's not an abuser, and that to me is like a huge, that's a huge example.
Because it's such a risk.
It is a risk, and especially when you're trying to like get something done like a TV show, and you're managing all of these people and all of these different aspects, and you're trying to get everybody like to go in the same direction with as much peace and serenity as possible.
And it's so much pressure. It's a moving train, and so much money, and everyone acts like it's curing cancer. It's really,
yeah. I mean, but that's also like the writers that I've been around are like, we are not curing cancer. Like, let's
get a little perspective.
Yeah, like let's be grateful for that we get to do this for a job,
right?
Yeah, but and that is true. I tend to, the reason why I think, like, I totally understand that this is not curing cancer or like, the world's problems in a certain in ways, but at all, but the thing that I think people forget maybe, or they either forget it or they don't want to know it, is that the power of storytelling cannot be underestimated.
Yes.
And it is a huge responsibility to write a story and then project it in front of millions upon millions of people all the time. Like,
well, you're shaping culture.
You're shaping cultural thought. You're shaping the atmosphere that we exist in as a
look
company.
What Glee did for the gay movement.
Yeah. Right.
Change the world.
Right. Or, or even like, I think Transparent has that.
Yes.
Orange is the New Black. I think it started with that.
God, this season.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. So then you have other shows like even like Sopranos, Breaking Bad, The Wire, like all of those shows, like the anti-hero thing, like that to me, I know there's a backlash against anti-heroes, but I think for me, it's not a mistake that those shows were so on point in a time where the covers have been ripped off of our country. Everything. And like the sort of like anti-heroes that are running shit, what I mean?
But at the same time, so like all the violence and all the ugly and all that shit that is coming true everywhere you look. Mm-hmm. The responsibility is huge.
It is huge, and so
it can go either way.
Yeah, so I think like, and I'm not saying like every show that's ever written has to be like have this like massive gravitas and like change the world, but it does have, you add something.
Because there's still The Bachelor.
Yeah, there's always, and there's always going to be The Bachelor, So
thank God.
Yeah, right. And my beef with reality TV is huge. But so yeah, you're always adding something. So it's like, so to be conscious of what that is a practice, obviously, and
like, what's your piece of the conversation?
Yeah, or even to the smallest detail of like how you describe your characters and your action lines makes an impact. Because I can't tell you as an actor how many times I read descriptions of my characters who were overweight that were demeaning and shitty. And
how do you describe women?
How do you describe men? How do you describe someone who's Asian or black or gay or whatever? Like, and I'm not, and people are like, well, fuck being PC. It's like, actually, no, you don't get to say that. Like, being PC is an act of generosity, and you're actually like, respecting the other person who's in the room. Do you know what I mean? Like, sorry that you have to like curtail you the way you want to act.
Until we're in a post-equality world,
which
we are nowhere near,
not even close.
You don't get to pretend it's over.
Yeah, and you just don't get to talk. You don't get to talk talk about people as if they're objects. I mean, that's really all it comes down to. Is like, stop objectifying people. That's a really huge problem that we have as human beings in our sex relationships, love, in our like friendships. Like, we just forget that other people are human. We think we're the only fucking person that has a feeling, you know? So like, as a writer, to me, it's really important, like, not just what you see on screen, but what you're writing on the page, because that's being read by hundreds of people. You know, and it's being read by actors who go into audition for your shit. So it's like, if you're writing, you know, stereotypical black characters or stereotypical Asian characters or fat women or whatever it is, like, there are hundreds of actors who are reading that and internalizing it whether they want to or not, and it fucking sucks. So really,
I think people hardly ever think about the actors.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is, like, it's you're writing something is just one piece of 50 other things that are happening around that script, and so it is a responsibility that has to be taken seriously. And when if I have students that write shit that is like would be deemed offensive by any kind of group, I tell them, I'm like, look, you cannot write that, like, or you can, but then just know that this is what you're doing, you know, like, so I'll give even like I'll give a prescriptive note, and I'm like, you know, becoming more black, or they act more black, or they act more gay, or whatever. I'm like, that is not, first of all, it's lazy writing. Just write the character. What do they do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do they actually physically do? And leave it at that. You don't have to make a
judge it.
Stereotypical, like, thing about it. Yeah. I mean, and that's, you know, like, if that makes me into, like, a fucking hyper-vigilant bitch, then that's what it is.
There should be one of you in every writer's room.
I don't know.
I don't know how commercially viable that is.
I mean, and there's ways to say things clearly. Like, obviously, like, I wouldn't go into a writer's room and be like, you can't fucking write that. Like, you know, that's not, I'm not advocating for that at all. I remember there was one time when I was in a room, it wasn't for the path, but somebody pitched this idea of, like, you know, the lead character was a white person, and her nemesis was a black guy who worked for like a private security firm. Like, he was like a big,
of course he did.
And she catches him, and they were like trying to pitch this idea of like, what does she do to him? And they're like in the middle of the desert, and somebody was like, what if she ties him to the back of the truck and he gets dragged along? And I raised my hand. I was like, wait. I was like, you cannot?
No.
You cannot. And they were like, why not? I'm like, okay, so in Texas, there was a guy who was
Remember
black.
that time?
Yeah, remember that? He got dragged. It was on the news, and they were like, oh. And it wasn't, so it's never like, I don't feel like people do it on purpose. Like, that's the thing. Like, when you say like something is racist or something is bigoted, it's so subtle most of the time, like barring like the like KKK type racism, like the other stuff is just like it's like blind spots. It's just not, it's like a lack of awareness in the moment. And so the way to like sort of wake people up to that, I mean, the problem is, like, with me, when I hear that, my first instinct is to attack because it makes me angry. Yeah. But then I'm like, okay, attacking is not going to solve the problem here. That you're just going to make that person defensive. They're not going to hear anything you're saying. So, like, how do you sort of, like, approach the situation as if everyone's coming with the best intentions? Because usually they are. I mean, again, barring, like, the real crazy assholes, like, most people are not out to, like, cause mischief and craziness. So then you can, like, just gently say, like, hey, there was this thing that was, like, national news. And so if you write that, like, it's probably going to bring a lot of unwanted attention to you.
Yes.
And they can hear that. Because I'm not saying, you're a fucking racist. You know what I mean? Which is my first response is, like, you're fucking racist. You're just a white, limo, liberal fucking race. Like, stop it. Like, I want to do that, but that's not useful.
Okay, so tell me. Was this an evolution of how you communicate this? Or were you aware pretty quick that, I can't talk like that?
Well, okay, so now, like, in my late 30s and 40s, like, I understand that you cannot go into a room and start yelling at people. It just doesn't work. But, like...
It comes with maturity.
Yeah, it's just, like, that just comes with maturity and realizing that not everybody gets Italians, so you just kind of have to, like, temper it down. But in my 20s, like, when I would get, like, when I was working at Labyrinth, I would get angry because, the executive director loved to, like, triage actors. Like, these are the A-list actors in the company. These are the B-list actors. Like, and he would say it in front of me, and I would become enraged. I would just get enraged. I'm like, you're a fucking classist. I can't stand you. And on top of it, it was like incompetence to boot. So like, I just didn't know how to like be politic about it. So I would yell a lot. Didn't work. So, and what was funny was like, I was eventually fired from that job. Like Phil Hoffman actually fired me. And then he called me from home and he's like, listen, he's like, you are here to be an actor and a writer and an artist. You're not here to be a fucking administrator. Like you don't belong in that office, you know? And he was right. And I stayed in the company, like when we were still friends, we were friends for forever, you know?
Like, is that the best thing that ever happened to you? Phil Hoffman fired you?
Yeah, well, one of them. Yeah, I had a few. I had some run-ins with him that were like amazing. You know, that was one of them. Like he fired me, and then he was like, "You're great. Like you should be doing."
I did you a favor.
I did you a favor, right?
You're gonna thank me.
And then the guy like that I was like enraged at all the time, who I also loved but couldn't. I was just mad at him all the time because of who he was. You know. Which is a whole, like, that's my problem. That's not him. That's me. He ended up getting fired anyway because people, like, realized, they're like, oh, Andrea's not crazy. I'm like, no, I'm not fucking crazy.
I'm just loud.
I'm handling it bad, but I'm not crazy, you know? So from that time, I was like, okay, you gotta, I also had, like, you know, decades of, like, resentments and fears and all this stuff that needed to be worked out. All my shit was coming out. Yeah. So I had to, like... So, you know, as I said, I submitted myself to the 12 steps many times and therapy. And
this is beyond my control.
Yeah, then you start to learn how to, like, work with others without wanting to murder them at the same time. You know, like they say, like, the 12 steps are, like, to prevent you from killing yourself, and the 12 traditions are there to prevent you from killing others. So that's been, like, a guiding principle for me. And it works, I have to tell you. It works for me. It literally, like... It really did change my life. Like, as soon as I started doing that stuff, like, my job changed, my life changed, how I felt about myself changed, my body changed. I lost, like, 200 pounds. Like, I stopped doing drugs. I stopped, like all of it. Yeah, all of it.
You lost 200 pounds?
When in 1993, I used to weigh 400 pounds, and then I lost 100 pounds in college just by virtue of being in
there's
New
a
York.
whole nother story.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, yeah. There's a lot of stories. And then recently, like, so when I came to LA with all that shit that was going on in the room, I also, like, quit smoking and I was heartbroken. Like, I was so fucked up. I gained another 45 pounds. So I was like 300 pounds by last July. I turned 40 and I was 300 pounds. So then I woke up one morning and I was like, my brain was just like, you should get a gastric bypass. And I was like, I mean, I was so dead set against gastric bypass.
Because I'm looking at you. You're not 300 pounds.
I'm not 300. No, I'm a size almost 10 now. So I just was waking up every morning having this thought about gastric bypasses, and which was so against everything that I was always like, I'm going to lose it myself. I've put on the weight.
That's cheating.
Yeah, it's cheating, whatever. So then, but for 3 weeks, I woke up with that thought, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna investigate it, and if all of the pieces fall into place without me having to really, like, fight it,
yeah,
then
if it doesn't enrage you,
yeah, and then there's, like, something that I need to do. So I did it, and it's actually the date I did it on October 26th last year, and I've lost like 103 pounds.
Oh my god!
And I've been working out. I have a trainer. I go to Bikram. I run. I meditate. I go to 4 programs. I go to group therapy. I go to regular therapy. Like I mean, and there's a reason why I do all this stuff. I'm not just like, you know.
There's a reason you're in LA.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I'm in LA. I mean, but no, I mean, I come from like a lot of like volatility and trauma and all this stuff from when I was a kid, and so I've been using the time here. LA is great for that. Like, if
you can find whatever you want.
You can find whatever you want, and that can be like a bad thing. You know, like there's a reason why LA is like the cult capital of the world. But it also, like, provided me with a lot of space to just, like, focus on that stuff and write. And that's it, you know.
Now, tell me this. Are you a success?
I think so. Yep, I do. For me to say no would be, like, the height of ingratitude. Like, I'd be an ingrate, you know. I'm aware that it's really hard to get staffed on a show. It's hard. It's super hard, and that's happened for me. So on that level, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm successful in that I have a job right now, even though it's ending in 3 weeks and I'm shitting my pants. But, like, you know what I mean? So it's like that, like, on that level, yes, you know.
And from what you've told me so far in this interview, I'm so proud of you for saying yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, right. I mean, it's like I have to, for me to be like, oh, it's like, okay, no, I can't do that. That would be like an insult to anyone listening who's like struggling and trying to get a job.
You're like, asshole, you're on a show.
Yeah, and I've, and I've been on that side too. Like, please, I'm 41. Like, this just started, like, me getting work in TV it started happening in 2010. Like, before that, it was literally like I said, I could not get arrested as a playwright for whatever reason.
You get arrested for other things.
I get arrested for other things and did, but and then I think, but for me, really, like, success is, there's this idea out there, this sort of like Ayn Rand fucking idea of success that's like very free market capitalist. Like, you're not a success unless your bank account says you are, and I just don't really buy that, especially now. Like, our economy is about to change and continue to change for the next 20 or 30 years, and people are going to be obsolete and technology is going to take over, like there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're not going to be able to like contend with. I just believe that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, and as you get older, it's like, your idea of success has to change. You cannot cling to this sort of like adolescent, like black or white thinking, because it will kill you. Like, it will actually kill you. So for me, it's like, okay, what are my personal relationships like? Like, do I have friends for the last 20 years, 25 years? The answer is yes. I have long-term friendships with people that I've known for 25 years, and we're close. And I'm close with the kids, and I'm their aunt. Like, those are markers of success. Like, do I have a love relationship? I do. I've had a few. I've had, and I have one right now that's like a little turbulent, but it's there. You know what I mean? And I'm working it out with this person. And like, I'm trying to be vulnerable and honest and present and all the rest of it. Like, it's not always going to feel good. It's not even necessarily always going to look good, but the effort is there. And yeah, you know what I mean? Like, so that kind of stuff. Am I taking care of my body? Like, the answer is yes. I go to my doctor's appointments. I take showers. I fucking exercise. I try to write every day. I meditate. I'm really doing the best that I can in all of those areas. And so when you take that, and even financially, like, oh my God, like, I was in a relationship for 5 years and like supported this guy. It's, for any women who are listening who are like supporting their men, like, just stop it and just go to therapy and do not do that shit. It's just so destructive. And I, as case in point, like, I didn't pay my taxes for 6 years because I used the money to take care of him and to take care of pay for stuff that I wanted, but wasn't taking care of myself in this other way. And I was avoiding it and procrastinating it. And so what I was doing was creating chaos in my life. Mm-hmm. And I can't understate how much like procrastination and avoidance and creating chaos is a way to avoid work. It's a way to avoid your creativity. And it's a way, it's just distraction. Like, you might as well be a meth head. You know what I mean? Like, it's just another addiction. So, when I got hired on this job on the path, I really was like, okay, the one thing, if I do nothing else, the one thing I have to do is file my fucking taxes since 2010. And I did it. And I haven't paid.
Did you dump that guy, by the way?
I did. Well, he was the guy that I broke up with in 2013. Yeah, he's gone. He's gone. We don't speak. It's fine. I wish him well. I don't, whatever. It's all good. But I learned, like, and I have this woman in my life who I, know from the rooms, and she was like, I was telling her, like, oh, I just paid my accountant $6,000 to file my taxes for the last 6 years, and I owe this amount to the government, and we're working out a payment plan. And I was like, I could kick myself for doing what I did. And she was like, you know what? The money that you owe to the government and to your accountant is the price of the lesson that you needed to learn. Because I'm never going to fucking do that again. Right? And I needed to, you know what I mean? Lesson. Yeah. And so, I don't mind sharing that, because I feel like those kinds of things are the kinds of things that nobody wants to be honest about, because they're so afraid of being judged. And I'm sure there's someone who's listening who's like, this bitch is a fucking train wreck. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I am a train wreck, and I'm trying to do something about it. And if I say this and it's helpful to someone to sort of like really look, like that conspiracy of denial shit, like that's what this is. It's like you have to look at the corners of the dark room in your mind and be like, where's the vagueness? where's the lie, where's the denial, where's the silence, and go after it.
Where am I looking the other way?
Yeah, because and ultimately, like, you know, because you create that, like, when you do that, when you confront it in small steps, you're creating more space for yourself so that you can actually do what you meant to do, whatever that is. And
you gotta clear out that garbage.
Yeah, and also, like, noticing your process through that can only make, in terms of writing, like, it can only make you a better writer. Like, the more specific you are with yourself, the more honest you are with yourself, the better your writing is going to become. You can't be, you know what I mean? I just think that's true.
Are you a badass?
People say that I am, but I'm also, like, a huge pussy. Like, there's, like, certain ways. I am a big fat puss. And I'll, like, case in point, I'll just, like, illustrate my week in New York. When I was in New York last week, I landed in New York and I went to stay at my friend Stephen Gergis's house, and he lives on the Upper West Side, and he lives 5 blocks south and 3 blocks east of this guy who I had, like, crazy feelings for, and we haven't spoken in 2 years, we parted amicably. It was like nothing bad happened. So I ran into him, and he was across the street, and I called,
as you do in New York,
like you do, yeah. And we've run into each other randomly like 5 times, like in New York and in Utah when I was in Utah too. It is a crazy, like, there's a crazy synchronicity with this guy, and upsetting because I'm like, I don't know what to say about this. And anyway, I saw him. He was walking towards me, but he was walking for, like, on a diagonal. And I called his name twice, and he was, like, looking around. And he stopped, and he saw me. And I raised my hand. I was like, hi. And he walked away from me. Like, just walked. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, we had no...
Like, turned around and walked away?
Literally walked away. And I was like, okay, I haven't seen him in 2 years. Maybe he didn't recognize me because I have lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I had called his name twice. You don't walk away from someone who's calling your name on the street.
Whose voice you'll recognize.
Whose voice, and, like, I didn't change my face. My face is my face. You know what I mean? Like, so I emailed him and I was like, hey, I just saw you.
What was that?
I was like, did you not know that it was me? And 2 hours later, he responded like a teeny bopper. He was like, OMG, no way. Like, I was so out of it. I was on my way out of town. I'm in the car. Blah. So sorry, my bad. Didn't ask me how I was. Didn't, like, nothing. So I was like, all of this taken together spells bullshit, you know? So I was like, okay, whatever.
Right. He's just not that into you.
He's just not, clearly. So then, like, and at first I want to be like, oh my God, he hates me. And I called a friend, and he was like, he doesn't hate you. He cannot deal with you. Like, whatever you bring up for him, he cannot deal. I'm like, but he's like a grown-ass man. He was like, it doesn't fucking matter. Cannot deal. But he doesn't hate you, you know, because I wanted to make it about, like, oh, I'm this criminal asshole or something. I don't know. Anyway, the bombs happened in New York that night.
While you were there?
Yes. And then, like, my roommate freaked out. She was having issues, and I was, like, dealing with that. And then my boyfriend freaked out, and he started having issues. Or I found out some stuff about him, and I was like, what the fuck, you know? And, like, we came to this discussion where I was like, all right, like, we need time away. You need to go deal with this shit. You let me know when it's dealt with, and I will consider, like, dating you again. And I was like, but I cannot be in this right now. It's too much. So, and then the next day after that, I emailed that guy that I ran into in the street, and I said, I just need to say that I do not buy for 1 second that you did not recognize me. And the reason why I'm telling you is because when it comes to you, like, I've kept my mouth shut so many times to my own detriment. So I'm just saying, like, 2 + 2 is 4. The sky is in fact blue. You saw me. You walked away from me. I was hoping that we could be, like, cordial and friendly to each other, but clearly not. And that's fine. But, like, I'm not going to, like, co-sign your story.
But welcome to the new world of honesty and transparency.
Right. So, like, these 3 things happened in my life that were, like, I've been avoiding. You know, I've avoided saying what I felt to this guy. I've avoided, you know, the issues with my roommate. I've avoided the issues with my boyfriend. You know, like, hoping, like, it'll just work itself out. And sometimes it does. But, like, I literally have avoided those 3 things for years. And so I was like, oh, I gotta be honest now. Fuck. You know, like this is the consequences of my actions. It's not even them, it's me. You know what I mean? And because they're all good people. They're all, you know what I mean? They've got great qualities, all of them. It's not acrimonious. It's just like there's conflict, and conflict is a part of relationships, and dealing with it is really difficult. It's difficult for me to be honest, because honesty sometimes in the past meant punishment, like actual real punishment, you know? And I think people, I don't think I'm alone in that. I think that people sort of at large have a problem with personal honesty. And to me, that all relates back to writing, you know? Like that whatever your work you're doing on yourself totally affects your creativity. It's part of you. It's connected. It's not separate. So badass, yes, sometimes, but oftentimes I am not.
Oh, that was all to illustrate
yeah.
that you were a pussy.
Yeah.
Can we say that as
well? Yeah, we can say that. I'm going to say pussy. Okay. Like, I'm going to co-opt my own. I'm going to reappropriate that word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you think we are as women in this industry?
Oh, I feel like, you know, I'm going to run the risk of sounding optimistic because sometimes I don't like to do that. But, like, I feel like women are sort of, you know, like how tsunamis are kind of like the ocean pulls back for a minute before it just fucking slams into the land and like destroys everything in its path. I feel like women are about to do that to Hollywood. I feel like we're sort of like in a drawback period, and the tsunami wave is starting to raise its head. Like, you know, you get Jill Soloway, Jessica Goldberg, like all these people, Mindy, like, yeah, you know, like all of these women are like doing really great work. Even Lena Dunham, like if you don't like the work in particular, like you don't have to, but you have to respect the fucking insane amount of work and patience it takes to get to that thing, you know what I mean? To even get your show done, you know? It's kind of like the Beyonce thing. You don't have to like Beyonce. I fucking love her. You don't have to like her, but you do have to give her props for being this woman who can get up in front of 55,000 people in stilettos and sing her and dance her ass off and look beautiful while she's doing it and totally command the space. Like that is a gift from the God I don't believe in sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, that's amazing. So I think the same thing applies for women in TV. It's like against all odds, and especially if they're black or Latino or some other like non-white, you know, ethnicity. It's like the amount of tenacity it requires to get to that place, it should not be underestimated, even if you don't connect with the material necessarily, you know? So I think that, like, I want to say that the tide is turning, but I also feel that the tide of the culture is turning. Whether you know, people bitch about, like, millennials and hipsters and, like, you know, whatever, like the new sort of way of talking about sexuality and gender and all this stuff. But to me, that's actually, it's a good thing. You know what I mean? It's uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. Yeah. You know? So I think that I hope that women are going to like take the shit over and just calm and deal. Because it feels like it. It feels like that needs to happen.
Boy, are we going to be disappointed if there's just a big backlash and
there probably will be a backlash. I mean, there's always a backlash, right? Like, it's like that's the kind of way that those tracks work. It's like, you know, if you look at any kind of like political movement, civil rights movement, like you know, even women's rights, like there's this push against the status quo, then there's a push back, and then there's a push forward, and we're inching forward to something, you know, even though it feels like we're sort of we're like running in place, but I don't think we are.
No, not this year in particular.
Certainly not.
But I think what we learned, or that we should have learned, because it happened in the 70s, and then it happened in the 80s, and a little bit in the 90s, just because we have a little victory, we can't stand still.
No,
it's over.
Complacency.
Keep pushing.
Yeah, no, complacency is completely like, that's like the Achilles heel of anyone. It's like, oh well, we got that done. Okay, well,
done.
Yeah, no.
Problem solved.
No way. It's vigilance, you know, and it doesn't
it's exhausting.
And it's exhausting, and we may not, you know, ever see parity in the way that we want to in our lifetime. That may actually not happen. You know, it hasn't happened in the decades before necessarily, but that doesn't abdicate you of the responsibility to try. You just have to do it. You know, and like, just fucking go down fighting until you die. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like there's no other option. Either that or you just bend over, you know, and I'm not into it, you know? No. But, and I say this, like, it's not to the exclusion of men. Men are men are necessary, they're wanted, they're needed, like their input, their whole thing, like it's not like women only and fuck you guys, you know, it's not that. It's just more like it's changing like the siege mentality. Like there's this, we've bought into this idea that there's not enough room for everyone at the table. That's our whole economic premise, and that is reflected in every industry that we have, and we have to knock that off, because that's what makes people into animals. You know, and that's what causes like cutthroat behavior, whether it's actually cutting people's throats, you know, or doing it socially in business and stuff.
Now that leads me to this. I'm working on a theory right now, which is what happens after we leaned in, because we leaned in, and the women I'm talking to don't need any more training, don't need any more anything. They're there, they're ready, they're doing it, and I think we're at the point now where men have to let us in. And so how do we make that case? Because no one's trying to be hating men or fighting men, but they got to help. How do we get them to help?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a tough question, and it to me it goes back to like before men are like willing to like let women in per se. Because I think that most men will be like, let you into what? We're not doing anything. Like we're not holding you back. You know, fuck you. You know, but I'm making an assumption there. But I think before that, it's actually like, to me, like men have to get involved in the protection of women on a sexual basis first, before I even want to talk to you about my job.
Oh, isn't that
like to me, like if you can't respect or if you can't defend women physically, emotionally, psychologically from abusers and attackers, you are not an ally.
Like if we're still talking about how to prevent rape from the woman's perspective, instead of telling men not to rape.
Right, men, but also men need to take an active role. It's kind of like white people need to take an active role in racism. Racism is not a black problem. It is a white problem.
Right.
Rape is not a woman problem. It's a man's problem. And they need to address it, and they're not. And they're not sufficiently, I'll say that. So until that sort of like cultural shift happens, they're not going to fucking give a shit about like whether they're going to let you in on a TV show. Like, who fucking cares? Do you know what I mean? Like, they have to, they again, it goes back to that objectification thing. Like, men have to really absorb into themselves that women are not objects.
Women are humans.
We're not your mother. We're not your fucking sister. We're not your wife. We're just, you know, we're here. You know, like, we're other people. And I again, this is like blanket statements. Like, I don't feel like all men are like this, but a lot are, and I feel like a lot of them could like really take the lead role in addressing this cultural issue. I mean, and then on the other hand, it's like, well, why am I going to this person asking them for permission for shit? Mm-hmm. You know, like women, there are powerful women here. You've got Oprah, you've got Ava DuVernay, you have all these other women, Tina Fey, whatever. These are powerful women that no one's going to say no to them. They're fucking powerhouses. Let these women support other women and give them the opportunities. Like, why are we even going to men? You know what I mean? Like, they should be on our staff. They should work for us, like, you know, just like we've been working for them, like those things. But the actual opportunities to produce, like, if you are really concerned about women being involved, then support women. Teach them how to negotiate their contracts. I don't know how to do that. Teach them fucking financial literacy. Teach them how to show run. Teach them how to fucking run a room without making writers into fucking dicks to each other. You know what I mean? Like, how to create the most, like, creatively, like, productive room that you possibly can. Like, just as we want men to, like, take responsibility, like, we have to take responsibility in supporting other women.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Other 50%. I'm Julie Harris Walker. Thank you to Andrea Ciannavei for telling us her story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features and bios of our guests. Thanks for listening. See you next time.